Hey, welcome to David's Life and Observation with your host, David Welch. Today's show is kicking off the 2020 season for David's Life and Observation, and I'm covering the Virginia Second Amendment rally. I'm also going to cover um, Kylie's fight, which, if you don't know the story about Kylie, I'm going to get into that in just a minute. And that's really all. I'm gonna kind of piggyback on some of the stuff people have already said about the impeachment, but I'm not gonna delve too deep into it. Um, One of the issues that I really want to cover with David's life and observation is Virginia's. Uh, I think I'm trying to think of his name. It's horrible names, guys. But essentially, the governor wants to strip away the Second Amendment to the point where it's almost non-existent in Virginia. And they didn't want firearms on the Capitol grounds during their, I don't even know what to call it, to their rally. And right outside the gate, these Gestapo gates were Second Amendment activists, Second Amendment um, individuals who believe are pro Second Amendment. Now, a lot of people are, especially in the mainstream media, you're seeing a smear campaign. Oh, these are just white supremacists. No, there were black men and women in that crowd as well. Not as many as whites, but regardless, they're there for the Second Amendment, not for their political ideology of white supremacy. White supremacy has nothing to do with what they were doing. It has everything to do with so the Second Amendment has everything to do with why they were there. If they are pro-right, the guy leading the charge against the whole guns things is a white dude. You would think, oh man, like let's go ahead and disarm everybody but our white police officers. In the state of Virginia, you would think they'd be pro that if they were white supremacists. And I don't believe that they were. I don't believe everybody in that rally had anything to do with white supremacy or even that ilk. Um, Essentially, what's going down in Virginia is the Democrats have taken over Virginia. I mean, the state went from red to blue. And since then, they've done some very fascist Gestapo shit. And part of the things that they're doing is a gun grab. They are attacking the Second Amendment, and what they're saying, what they're telling law enforcement is, if you don't do your job, you don't go grab these guns, we're gonna find ways to get rid of you. Now, all the sheriffs have already band together and said, no, dude, it's unconstitutional. We can't do that. It's against the Second Amendment. Democrats don't care about the Second Amendment. They say they do, but they're telling you fiction. They're not. There's a difference between a Democrat and a progressive. A progressive is pro Second Amendment to the point where they're okay with home defense, things like that, and they understand the concept. A true progressive understands the concept of the Second Amendment. However, there are some progressives that are still, nobody should have guns. It would be a better world if nobody had guns, but that's also fantasy land. It's fiction. It's not a world that I want to live in, honestly. I want to live in a world where people are fucking afraid to assault you and do things because you're armed. Antifa didn't show up, and they didn't show up in numbers, and they didn't do shit to anybody in Virginia. That was a very peaceful protest. And want to know why? Because every motherfucker there, almost every person there was armed. So when you go to a Second Amendment rally, it's mostly peaceful. You see a lot of people who will shout, say things, whatever have you, but they're not backing that up with force. Now, if you go to May Day in Oregon, where they make it impossible for you to carry a firearm, there you see a lot of clashes in the street with other weapons: bats, chains, brass knuckles, manufactured weapons of all sorts except for firearms. Because if Oregon were like the state of Virginia, where the Virginians are more than willing to come to anywhere armed, you would not be the May Day protest in Oregon would not be as chaotic as we've seen on television. The only reason it rise to that level of chaos is because the guys that attacks, the Proud Boys or anybody else who they consider right wing or they consider conservative, they're attacking them full force because they know they're not armed or they're not armed with a firearm. I'm sorry, but if you would have a very peaceful May Day if you had people who were pro Second Amendment there with firearms, and then Antifa would be there, be like, man, we're gonna mill around and we're gonna shout and raise hell, but we're not gonna do anything physically to these guys because look across the street, these guys are packing heat. Now, we see what happened in Virginia, and we also saw that nothing happened. We saw that nobody was killed. Nobody was run over by a fucking car. A lot of people in the mainstream media are like, oh, it's going to be another Charlottesville. Not even close. Not even close, because people in Virginia, a lot of Virginians have common sense. They're not going to, and they also don't endorse the pro-white supremacy bullshit. You think they do, but a lot don't. You had a lot of minorities out there armed as well. It wasn't just white people. A lot of white people, but it wasn't just white people. And there are videos out there of black men and women doing interviews at the rally. So it's not like you can say, hey, it doesn't exist. It does. I was on Tim Truth's show talking a little bit about that during the rally. He covered it extensively. 6 hours of live content, bringing on speakers, covering the different speeches that were there. And I really like high impact vlogs or high impact flicks on Facebook. That guy's amazing. He was there just walking around asking the tough questions to Alex Jones of InfoWars. He was asking tough questions of the law enforcement officers there, essentially following orders and doing Gestapo shit. It's like Milgram's experiment, but on a larger scale. And it's hilarious to see Milgram be right in his experiment or hypothesis that people will follow orders under the assumed authority of someone else. And it's sad to see that. We see that in Virginia. My final thoughts on that is, hey, if a lot of the rallies that people and a lot of protests that people do from 2020 forward and all of 2020, all the protests that they do, I guarantee you, if you came armed to the teeth, mind you, and had a well-regulated militia behind you, the police, the state, won't fuck with you. They'll back down on their rhetoric of trying to take your firearms because they don't want, as much as you think they do, they don't want armed conflict because they know that if their side doesn't win, they're getting beheaded. I'm telling you, and this makes me take a hard look at history. This is something that High Impact Vlogs speaker, the host said. It makes you take a hard look at the Civil War and what the Confederacy was doing. Outside of just being racist pricks, they were simply not complying with the Union. They wanted to be separate from the Union. And that didn't necessarily mean that they did it purely on racist motivations, which is one of the major motivations they did use. But outside of that, it was to not be roped in with the Union in their policies and law. They wanted to govern themselves as free people want to do. And we should live in a free society, but we see time and again where statists and police powers and political powers are constantly restricting people's ability to utilize and have their rights. So that's what a huge momentous look at the Second Amendment rally in Virginia was a good indication that yes, if you do come armed and ready for battle, intellectually and physically, that the other side is going to take a little bit more note, and they won't be as rash to try and take anything from you or even effect an arrest. There was a woman who got arrested for wearing a mask. I don't believe that's an arrestable offense. As a free person, you should be able to wear a mask. You should be able to be anonymous. You shouldn't have to submit to the state's facial recognition software. You should be able to hide who you are, and that's on both sides. We see it on both sides where law enforcement does it. They're kitted up. They've got their mask to here. They got their goggles. They got their helmet covering to about right here. So you can't tell me that it's not both sides who are covering their faces. It is. And they wear ski masks and they're dressed in their SWAT gear because they want to look cool and act like they're, essentially that's posse comitatus, where they're a standing army inside of the United States. And they're a standing army for the government. They're not a standing army for the people. That'd be a well-regulated militia. We're allowed to have that. But we have a standing army of government agents in this country who are more than willing to impose martial law, who are more willing to impose fascist policies that aren't even law and they're against the Constitution. We see it time and again with law enforcement officers who believe that photography is a crime, that, they need your permission to film you. No, dumbass, they don't. People don't need permission to film you in a public setting. That goes for public offices. That goes for public places like the county clerk's office. That goes for the DMV. If you are government funded, you are allowed to carry a camera in there, and it is on you, the business or the employees, to safeguard information. It is not on the onus of the person filming. That's what you people have to understand, those who work in government. And nobody needs your permission for your fugly ass face to be on camera. They don't. If you're a fat ass bitch sitting behind a desk punching, paperwork for the state, then I'm sorry, but your lovely self is going to be all over the internet. And if you file privacy complaints, YouTube, and you need to get a hold of this notion, YouTube, that they have no expectation of privacy in a public setting when they are a public official. They don't. If you don't like being video recorded, if you don't like work in the private sector, and take down all your cameras, all your security cameras too, because a lot of the cameras that are in these public buildings, they're for security. No, they're not just for security. They're for surveillance of the citizenry. And if you don't like that concept or notion, if you don't want your picture taken, then leave public office forever. Don't ever go back into public office. And then again, we step into the arena that I wanted to get into for this next topic: medical kidnapping. It's a thing. It's real. We have had so many cases in this country where somehow a doctor's belief in his practice of medicine, that's why it's called a practice, is so superior to a parent's right to discern what medical needs their child needs. Now, there is a difference. Now, if a person is successful with medical cannabis, if they're successful with holistic mechanisms to treat, let's say, cancer per se, because if you're, a cancer doctor, you're getting paid an ass ton of money to pump poison into people, and there are studies that admittedly say that doing chemotherapy is only effective a small percentage of the time, not 100% of the time. So patients should be able to look at other mechanisms of treatment. This is why I want to get into Kylie's fight. You guys don't know, but they took away her Make-A-Wish because her mom didn't want to comply with the way those doctors wanted to do her treatment. And I don't agree with that. If the tumor shrank with her doing other holistic remedies, then, Kylie should be open to that, especially if you've gotten to the point where you've given up on her as a medical professional. As a medical professional, and all your only solution is to pump more poison through this kid, and they get to the point where they can't move, they can't eat, and then they have this other holistic way of of being, and then they develop an appetite. They start to get better. The tumor shrinks. Look into it. Look into it seriously and consider the fact that it's working. We have time and again where there's a false test on a mom who just gave birth to a baby, and the CPS comes in and they take the child, and next thing you know, the child dies in CPS custody. Happens all the time, and it shouldn't. People need to get wise and hip to the fact that they might want to get, like, if you're having a baby, you might want to go armed. I know most hospitals have a policy of don't carry firearms and stuff into the hospital. I get it. But you shouldn't also be defenseless in the sense of a state goon, police officer, CPS, or even a doctor taking your child from you when you're not endangering the child. And I don't care how many PhDs these motherfuckers have, if they are effectively killing a child with their medicine and their practice, then they should be equally held liable. And that's not what happens. So my thing is this, because they won't tell Kylie's mom where Kylie is right now. They have moved her. They have moved hospitals, moved her time and again, and she's a cancer patient. Okay, she wants her mom. She wants her mom wants justice, and I believe that Kylie's mom should take on and hire or request armed militia and armed fellow soldiers, former soldiers, to come in and take action. To the point, if the doctors resist or if the state agents resist, they should absolutely be killed because they have no right. I'm telling you, there's a misconception that the state thinks they have a right to a kid. They have a right to your kids. They don't. Medical kidnapping happens too much. CPS lying and false information and false testimony has gotten millions and millions and millions of kids taken from their parents who are good parents. Now, there are instances where, of course, the kids living in feces, refuse, ridden home, and it's bad. I believe CPS workers should always have a camera. They should be mandated to have body cameras when dealing with potential new clients or bad parents or whatever have you. They should be mandated to have body cameras that are on all the time. All law enforcement too. They should never be able to fuck with once their body camera's on for the night, it should just be on. I don't care if they take a shit, piss, whatever. Everything they do should be under the scrutiny of the people. And all this hiding information, law enforcement does a really good job of hiding information from the people because they hide with their state attorney saying that they don't have to turn over documents. It's public information, and yes, the fuck you do. So unless there are enough people putting consequence on state agents, they're going to keep doing corrupt shit. So it's going to get to the point, and this medical kidnapping, the gun grab in Virginia is all part of the same hoopla of bullshit that's going on in the political sphere that is going to get people killed. And it's going to get doctors killed. It's going to get not just police officers killed. It's not going to get just government officials killed. It's going to get a lot of people killed. You're going to get CPS agents that are going to get shot in the street. You're going to have... And the chaos is going to come. I mean, people are almost to the point now where they're disillusioned with law enforcement because they've either had a personal experience that went awry, or they've had an experience that they've seen so many times on film that they're just disgusted, and people are not accepting the bullshit anymore. They're not accepting the lies from law enforcement. They're not accepting the bullshit and first answers from doctors, and they shouldn't. A little bit on the impeachment. Now, the impeachment didn't go anywhere. I called it. I mean, that wasn't going to go anywhere anyway. Donald Trump's still your president. He's going to finish out president. He's going to might hand the reins over to somebody else, but we live in a time where people are just getting sick of whoever the fuck's in office. That's what it comes down to. People are putting so much stock in feuding over, you gotta be a Democrat, you gotta be a Republican, you gotta be a conservative, you're a liberal, and all that bullshit aside, all you guys are quibbling and quabbling about is a new master. And your new master right now is motherfucking Donald Trump, and he's not. Yeah, he got impeached in the House, but it's not going to pass the Senate. And it was a witch hunt. It was an absolute witch hunt, and it was terror. It's fascist in nature the way they went about it. Closed doors meetings, private witnesses, all this bullshit. No, Democrats, you have lost a lot of political agency for the upcoming election. You are going to force Republican and conservative Gestapos to be in office and win because you went so hard in the paint against the American people's wishes. So you're going to lose seats. It's going to happen. You're going to lose a lot of major seats in the upcoming elections. So don't get mad if, 90% of the United States is red because you decided to fuck off and, go against the grain of the American people and, one, go for guns, try and do this huge gun grab. Two, try to impeach a president who didn't do anything. And three, endorse medical kidnapping without imposing strict laws on that. Anyways, thank you for tuning in to David's Life and Observation. Please like, subscribe, and comment down below, and let me know what you think.